Hi, this is RJ Thomas, editor-in-chief of the HVPTO Surf Report, here with the first ever edition of Surf Report Radio. One of the big issues facing Hermosa Beach voters in a little more than a month is Measure Q. With Measure Q, the school district is hoping to raise money to build new facilities to ease overcrowding. Recently, I got a chance to sit down with some parents, teachers, school administrators, and elected officials to talk about Measure Q, what it is, why we need it, and what it means to the students of Hermosa Beach. This was recorded at Valley School on September 27th as they prepared to head out into the town, knock on doors, and educate voters. There were a number of things going on that day, including some maintenance work, so I apologize now for any leaf blowers that may cause you discomfort. I'm here with Ryan Nowicki. Ryan, what's your job? What are you doing here today?
I'm here to support Measure Q. I'm the chairperson on the committee, the Yes on Measure Q committee, and we've been working very hard to get people to support the measure.
And what is the measure?
Measure Q is a school improvement measure. Right now our schools are very overcrowded, and they're also some of the oldest buildings in any school district in the South Bay. So we need to raise some money to reopen North School, and the only way to do that is to either reconstruct it or to remodel it. And also we need some just general major upgrades to Valley and View.
I'm here with Tammy Heath. Tammy is a teacher at Hermosa Valley School. Tammy, what do you teach?
I've been at this school for 15 years. I've taught a variety of different social studies classes, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I'm primarily the U.S. History 8th grade teacher. I've also taught different social studies related electives over the years.
15 years, so you've seen the changes with the bigger group coming in, more kids. What's it been like? I mean, we hear there's overcrowding, but what's it really like?
I've been here, and throughout the 15 years, we would have what we call bubbles. So it might be very normal populations of students per grade level, and then we'd have this big boom, this very large group. And so we were able to handle those groups and pretty smoothly have them, join the whole population of kids. But now these bubbles are permanent. And so we just have larger and larger groups coming in. And the impact on teachers and students would be, I think, the quality of the day. Meaning it's crowded when you get here, it's crowded when you're walking around, it's crowded in the classrooms, there's limited supplies, everything from textbooks to desks, just about anything you can think of. Running out of Kleenex was mine this week already, those little runny noses. But in all seriousness, it's a situation that is not temporary, and that, I believe, is the bigger issue and the reason for passing a bond and making sure that we're looking to the future of our growing district.
Here with Carleen Beste, who's on the school district school board. Carleen, you've been on the school board for how long?
Almost 5 years, so in the midst of my second term.
Tell me a little bit about the evolution of this, about where Measure Q came from, essentially.
So I think you can go back actually a really long ways and talk about the position that we were in several years ago when the funding from the state was just not there for us, and we were in a position of having to decide if we were going to remain as a district or going to have to do something else. And for about 2 years, I think, we went through that whole process of looking at merging with other districts, charter schools, doing what we needed to do to stay afloat as a district. Ultimately, we decided to restructure and have been moving forward with that path, which is great. I think being able to keep our schools is an awesome thing for us as a community. Just after that was happening, we're seeing this steady increase in enrollment and squeezing. And I think that we've used multi-purpose rooms and put classes in multi-purpose rooms. At the last school year, we put portables up at both View and down at Valley School. And the multi-purpose room at View is still being used for a couple of classrooms. So we've used almost every bit of space we have. Even at Valley, we've done some creative work where we've moved the district office out, moved the school office up, reconstructed space so that we have a classroom where the teacher's lounge used to be. So we've done everything that we can with our footprint, and still students keep coming. Our enrollment is up this year over last year. So when we saw this enrollment trend a couple of years ago, we started down this path of having to develop a long-range facilities master plan so that we can understand what we could do with the space that we have. After that comes this decision of having to decide if we are going to do what we need to do to have the classrooms available to the students that we need to, or do we continue to put portables on the existing space and squeeze more students into the school space that we have. And I think the school board, looking at that, said, you know what, it's not good for us to continue to put more people on the postage stamps that we already have available. We have a resource that's available to us, and that's the property at North School. It's currently a leased property, but it is property that the district owns. And we have the ability, if Measure Q passes, to reopen North School, shift a couple of grades to North School, move some kids from Valley, and move some kids from View, move that around a little bit so we alleviate the overcrowding at both View and Valley right now.
Do you have any numbers? Like, what are we talking about in terms of like how overcrowded are the schools?
The basic thing you can think of is back in the 50s, Hermosa Beach used to have 6 elementary schools.
Wow.
With 1,400 kids in total. Now we have 2 elementary schools with 1,400 kids total.
Wow.
So we're educating the same number of students as we did back then, but at only a couple schools.
So 6. So where are all those properties, and what happened to them?
Very good question. The way that the school board has raised money in the past when they needed money for either improvement projects or, say, to build Valley, is they would sell off properties. Instead of issuing a bond or asking Hermosa residents to increase their property taxes, they would sell a school campus. Student populations fluctuate, and in the 70s, and several decades ago, for some reason our school age population was much less than it is now. The problem is we have this need right now.
And what, I mean, do you guys, can you give me a number in terms of like how many students the schools are supposed to hold and how many they're actually holding?
Sure. So Valley when Valley was originally built, it was originally intended to only have about 700 students. Mm-hmm. We have close to 1,000 kids.
Wow, so 300 over.
Exactly.
Just at Valley. And how about View? Do you have any numbers?
View, I believe View was, when originally constructed, only supposed to hold about 200 to 300 kids, and I believe we have close to 400 kids at
Wow.
View.
Wow.
So we have about 1,400 in total, and we're over capacity, a good 400 to 500 kids.
Wow.
We need another school.
So tell me a little bit about Measure Q. How much does it hope to raise? How is it going to do that? How are we going to get the money?
Sure. Measure Q is it's a general obligation bond. Mm-hmm. What it means, it's different than a parcel tax, so the two are different. But with a general obligation bond, you can use the money for brick and mortar improvements only. Money from Measure Q can only go towards building new facilities and renovating older facilities. It cannot be used for teacher salaries, cannot be used for administrative salaries, only for brick and mortar improvements. So the measure, the school board is asking for $54 million to build or rebuild North School. And also some of that $54 million would be used to make general improvements, much needed improvements at View and at Valley.
And how would that money get paid back? I mean, what's going to be the impact to the average homeowner in Hermosa Beach?
It'll result in an increase in your property taxes of close to $30 a year per $100,000 of assessed value.
Okay.
So, for example, if a couple just purchased a home in Hermosa Beach and they just purchased it and it cost them $1 million, this measure would increase their property taxes $300 a year.
Okay.
And the term of the bond is about 30 years.
Okay.
It's about 25 to 30
okay.
Because what we do is we don't buy all $54 million in bonds tomorrow. We buy some tomorrow, we buy some a year from now, we buy more later on. The bonds typically have a 25-year term, but because we would likely be purchasing the bonds over a 3 to 5 year period, that's why we say 30-year term.
Okay, and so there are a lot of older residents in town whose assessed value may be, I mean, it's kind of hard to believe in Hermosa Beach, maybe like 200,000, 300,000.
True.
So their impact would be a lot less.
Very true.
Maybe even like $60, $90 a year.
And that's it. So if you're a Strand owner and you have, a $3.5 million fair market value home, but your assessed value for property tax purposes is only $500,000, then your property tax burden for this measure would be significantly less than the Strand owner next to you who just purchased and built their new home.
Here with Carolyn Petty, one of our city council members in Hermosa Beach, California. Carolyn, tell me a little bit about the sort of interaction between the school district and the city in terms of this bond measure. Some people have said, why can't we use city buildings for extra classroom space?
The city does what it can to help the school. But something that everybody needs to keep in mind is that the school is a separate entity from the city. And so for legal purposes, there's only so much we can do. And as a result, we're always in search of ways that we can help the schools. The other consideration is that the city doesn't have excess revenues, and so it's tight for the city as well. But we continue to explore ways in which we can work together. We have meetings as often as we can to explore those options.
And what about, just using city buildings and sticking a classroom here, a classroom there? Is that even something that's possible?
That's something that we have talked about. One of the challenges, and this is a story that I will never forget, something that I saw. Jack Burns, when he was on the school board, at one point had a massive book on his table, and it was the school code. And that's something that people have to realize, is that you can't just take a building and turn it into a school. There are so many laws governing what can be deemed a safe classroom, that it's not as simple as people would think it is. And then the other complication is that the city does not have enough space for our own employees. And we're struggling with that same challenge.
The same issue as well.
Exactly.
You guys the fire department's cramped.
Absolutely.
Police department's cramped. So it's not really like we could take a room next to City Hall and just stick a classroom. It's just, that doesn't work like that.
Some of the newer laws, as I understand it, become so restrictive now, and then maybe this will be challenged, and maybe there are some nuances that I'm not aware of. You can't place a school next to a highway.
Wow.
So Pacific Coast Highway is
Counts
next
as a
to,
highway.
yes. And so whereas people might think it's a no-brainer to put a school there, well, however many years ago, when they decided that it wasn't safe for students to be located next to a highway, that poses a problem. Now, I'm sure that there are schools that are currently grandfathered in, because there are many schools next to highways. Then the issue is, could you now locate a new school next to a highway? It's not going to be grandfathered in at that point. So many rules. Politicians love to come up with rules, but then in the end, so many people become hamstrung by these rules. It becomes untenable for us to do many things.
So there's been some opposition, to a school bond measure. There was a school bond measure, I guess we found out earlier, passed in 2002.
2002.
Which helped to build the gym. And so some of the opposition is saying, well, look, you guys did that. You said you were going to build classrooms and you built a gym. Can you address that in any way?
Sure. The gym was part of that 2002 bond measure, but so were classrooms. So in addition to the gym being built, there were classrooms that were built.
Okay.
So we did get some of the classrooms that we wanted out of that, but a couple things happened with that bond measure. First, that all started to happen when, unfortunately, we were seeing the big real estate boom. So construction costs rose, just soft costs rose, so that wasn't anticipated back then. Another thing that happened was there was a group of local residents who were displeased with how the money was being spent, and they sued the school district. What that ended up being is that lawsuit took money away from the school district, where we had to pay attorney's fees, and a lot of that money would have been used to build a couple of the extra classrooms that we didn't get.
Okay.
Now what's interesting about that lawsuit is the opposition group lost. They lost that lawsuit at the district court level. They weren't pleased with that, so then they appealed, and the appellate court, they lost to the appellate court level as well.
So the appellate court upheld the decision in favor of the school district.
In favor of the school district.
Okay.
And what the district court said was, well, the lawsuit was generally about the fact that the opposition was saying that the school district was not using the money in the way that the school district said they were going to use it in the bond measure. The district court found that they did use it in the way that they promised in the bond measure. So the district court said, school district, you're doing everything you said you were going to do. Appellate court said the same thing. The opposition then still wasn't happy, and they appealed the appellate decision to the California Supreme Court. And the California Supreme Court didn't even bother to take the case because they didn't feel as though
it was worth looking
it
at.
was worth looking at. Another interesting part about that lawsuit is the judge at the district court level felt as though the suit was so frivolous that the judge sanctioned the plaintiffs, the opposition, and told them that they had to pay for the school district's attorney's fees, a couple $100,000.
Wow. Money that the school district could really use right now.
Could really use right now. Money they could have used back then to build those other couple classrooms. That group has still not repaid.
So I've heard people say, why don't we just throw some classrooms in the community center? It was a school at one time. It was even in the movie Carrie, I guess.
Yes, one of my favorite movies.
It's a school. But why don't we turn it back into a school?
Very good question. And that's a question that the Facilities Planning Advisory Committee looked at extensively for the last couple of years. That used to be one of our school sites. I mentioned earlier, or maybe others have mentioned as well, that the school district used to have 6 schools throughout the city. That was one of them. It was Pier Avenue School. And so we looked at that, obviously, as a possible solution. It's already built. It's up and running. However, it's not complete to be a school, so it would need some improvements. For example, at the very least, we need a cafeteria. So some money would have to be put into the community center in order to reopen it as a school. So the Facilities Planning Advisory Committee looked at that option. And what we found, and what was essentially the last nail in the coffin to relieve ourselves of that issue of reopening or of using the community center, is that under California law, if a school district is to put any money into improving a building, the school district either has to own the building or it has to have that building under a 40-year lease, a 40-plus year lease. A lot of the talk about using the community center is, well, we know our school population fluctuates. Why don't we just take back the community center for about 5 or 10 years, do what we need to do to it, take it back for 5 to 10 years, and if the school population goes down, then we'll give the community center back, and we'll be fine. We cannot do that. Under California law, we either have to own the community center or lease it for 40 plus years.
The problem is we don't own the facility, so therefore you can't use bond money to pay for the upgrades to the facility, and and we don't have the money to put into a piece of property that we don't own. I think the other thing to consider too is that we had someone from the state come down and assess this facility for use as a school site. Now, not only did we find out that information about not being able to use our money to upgrade that facility because we don't own it, there's also things that would prevent us from using it as a school site because of its proximity to a state highway. So there are a lot of reasons why the community center isn't an option for us.
Yeah.
So then the next option is, well, what do we have? We have North School. We own it. We can do as we please with North School. All options are on the table with North School. This campaign has 2 really big challenges. First is just getting people to know about Measure Q. And the second is getting the word out about why we need Measure Q. So it still amazes me that some people in town have not heard of Measure Q. That's probably because I've been so intricately involved in this process for the last couple of years.
You've known about it all along. You're living and breathing it.
Exactly.
Right.
Not everybody has been.
Right.
So it's a challenge for us to get the word out about Measure Q. There's a lot of issue exhaustion in Hermosa Beach right now. Between oil, between hotels, between parking lots, you name it. There are a lot of things that Hermosa Beach has been paying attention to.
And people saying, hey, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're kind of the last ones to the game right now. The problem is this is really, really important.
I've heard people talking, in fact, Pat Escalante was just talking a little while ago about the situation with the E&B, the oil issue that's before the voters, that will be before the voters, and talking about money that may or may not come to the school. How would that money be different than what this bond measure would bring in, and why wouldn't we just wait for that oil money?
Great question. The schools can always use as much funding as possible, but there are essentially 2 parts to that answer. One, is the obvious answer, in that we don't know for certain if that money's ever going to come. And so we cannot rely on it. What the schools have right now is a serious and immediate need that we have to address right now. The school board has actually acknowledged that they're about 2 years behind on this whole process. So we should have been building a new school a year ago,
right,
2 years ago, but we're behind. So we unfortunately cannot wait to speculate on what's going to happen with the oil vote in March.
And whether or not it actually even gets passed.
Exactly. So that's the speculative part of the answer. The second part of the answer is the money that E&B has pledged towards the school district. They've pledged some of it towards a very small part of it would actually go to the school district general fund, which the school district could use as it pleases. But the majority of the money that E&B just recently pledged to go to the school district has been pledged to the Education Foundation. And the school district has no say in what the Ed Foundation does with that money. It's also the amount of funds that the school district needs. I mentioned we have a serious and immediate need right now. The biggest need for funds right now is to rebuild North School. That's going to be, out of the $54 million that we're looking to raise with Measure Q, that will be the largest chunk. That would be the largest chunk of money going to that. What E&B has pledged, from what we've seen in the numbers, I believe has been about 30 to 40 million over the life of the E&B oil project,
which is 30
years, 30 something years. We can't wait 30 years to build a new school.
Right.
We need to do it right now.
Right. One of the other questions I've heard was people are wondering who can vote on this. Is it because it's a property tax issue? Is it just property owners? Can renters vote? What is it? I mean, it's almost like Civics 101, but
sure.
Who can vote on this?
Very good question, very important question. Any Hermosa Beach registered voter. So it doesn't matter if you're a parent or not a parent. It doesn't matter if you're a renter or a homeowner. If you are registered to vote in Hermosa Beach, you can vote on Measure Q.
I'd like to thank Ryan Nowicki, Tammy Heath, Carleen Beste, and Carolyn for taking the time to sit down with me. I'd also like to thank my wife for putting up with me for most of a Saturday as I sat with my headphones on, staring at a computer as I cut this piece together. That's it for this episode of Surf Report Radio. Until then, see you in the bowl.